Hey everyone, this is Lady B coming to you today with a very special podcast segment. All of us podcast princesses have a lot of thoughts and feelings about the character development in the series, and Elena is no exception. So today I have prepared a special analysis of Elena's character from before season 1 began all the way through present canon. And I even make a few speculations as to what I think might happen in the future. So let's talk about Elena Castillo Flores, Crown Princess of Avalor, the first Disney Latina princess, who has been the source of much controversy in the over 3 years since the series premiered on Disney Junior. Is she a real princess? Is she a true representation of Latino culture? And more recently, is she really even a hero? My answer to all of these questions is a resounding yes, yes, and yes. Elena is absolutely, without a doubt, the heroine of her story. But to truly understand Elena's character, we have to examine her character from an empathetic perspective, meaning there are a lot of complex feelings and motivations tied up in everything that makes Elena who she is. Every choice and mistake has an intricate web of context woven into it that must be taken into consideration. In addition to those thoughts and feelings, there are also many events that we've seen happen throughout the course of the series and things that we know happened before that give us insight into what makes Elena tick, who she is as a person, and that provide a foundation to make educated guesses as to who and what she will become as her story continues to unfold. Now let's rewind a bit. There are some key events in Elena's past that color her entire journey, a journey that began almost 45 years prior to present canon. Keep in mind she was 16, a young ruler in training who probably thought she had at least half a decade, if not longer, before she would take the throne. So really, she was still very young in a lot of ways. Innocent, maybe a bit naive, possibly irresponsible, reckless, and on occasion, even a bit selfish. In short, she was a very human teenager. And no offense to the teens out there, just that those are traits commonly outgrown throughout the process of adolescence and even into adulthood. But as is true with so many tragedies in life, in the blink of an eye, her world came crashing down and was forever changed in a very traumatic way. Now, I would like to take a moment to try and look at things from Elena's perspective. All right? Imagine watching your parents murder right before your very eyes by a woman who laughed about it. That's right, let's not forget that from what we can see from Elena's flashbacks, Shuriki clearly took great pleasure in the murder of Elena's parents, and Elena saw it all. Now, imagine choosing to willingly sacrifice your own life in an attempt to buy your remaining family time to get to safety, only to become magically imprisoned in a jewel for over 4 decades, imprisoned, isolated, and alone, yet very aware for 41 years. Imagine being trapped with those horrifying memories for over 4 decades. Sounds to me like a recipe for one emotionally broken young woman. But Elena is a fighter. She was not known to give up on anything, ever. And this was no different. It is not clear exactly how the magic of the amulet works. Did Elena come up with the plan to find the right princess, or was that something she just knew because of the inherent magic of the amulet? Or was it something Alcazar and Zuzo came up with and somehow she picked up on? Because we know it was Alcazar who immediately took up the amulet in search of a princess who could do what needed to be done. This is an area where I believe we need to suspend disbelief and sum it up to quote-unquote magic. The whole search for Sophia was a team effort involving multiple parties, so to pin that solely on Elena would just be plain short-sighted. The point is that Elena never gave up in all those years, even though things seemed hopeless. So let's fast forward a few decades. Sophia receives her call to the quest from Alcazar's spirit, not from Elena, I'd like to point out, and accepted it. With Zuzo, the Jacquins, and Mateo's help, she frees Elena from the amulet. And after the obligatory Disney princess motivational song, Elena is ready to march on her palace and give that witch a taste of her own medicine, alone. Yes, alone, she runs off to confront Shuriki, and yes, her plan apparently included paybacksies by assassination. And let the record show that I am not saying it was a good plan. But again, at this point, Elena is a hot-headed, emotional 16-year-old girl who suffered a great trauma and has had to live with her own perceived failures for nearly half a century. Really, it's no surprise that she messed that one up. She is impulsive, but the truth is that this royal mistake provided her character a baseline from which to grow. Character development, folks. It's a beautiful thing. Her thought process and motivations are clear, however. She believed it was her fight alone and that she had to defeat Shuriki on her own. I feel like this motivation is really quite complex because it stems from multiple sources. 1. She is overly confident, bordering on arrogance. 2. She believes it's her job to protect everyone and is not willing to risk her new friends and allies or her people to get the job done at first. 3. I think she was still stuck in lone wolf mode. And by that I mean, how do you just go from relying on nothing but your own wits for 4 decades to relying on others so quickly? Short answer, you don't. You do your best and you learn from the inevitable fallout, which is exactly what happened. But Elena learned her lesson and then some. She learned to rely on her friends and allies. She learned that the very first kernel of truth that she would need in her journey to becoming a great ruler, her kingdom was not just hers to fight for, but her people's. She learned that her plight is her people's plight. This, I believe, was the first step in her journey to no longer seeing the world through amulet-colored eyes. So one thing I think is super interesting about Elena is that she did not come out of her imprisonment empty-handed. Apparently, being trapped inside a magical amulet has a few advantages, and in this case, it gave her magical powers that she did not possess beforehand. She gained a connection to the spirit world that allows her to see chanuls without a wizard's spell, and she can see ghosts on Dia de los Muertos. Now, as a side note, I kind of think that Elena, in theory, should be able to see any spirit that happened to be wandering the land of the living on any given day. She just hasn't had the opportunity in the story, and logically assumed it was the only on the Day of the Dead because, well, that makes some sense, since that's the day that the spirits of the dead visit the realm. Why would she be able to see spirit animals and not, say, Amalai, who had been essentially haunting that temple in Tepet Mul for centuries? Logically, it doesn't make sense to me that Elena would not be able to see Amalai had she wandered through that temple on some other day. But it does make sense that Elena would assume such a thing until proven otherwise. But I digress. She also has Maruvian magic in her that she learned to channel through her scepter, the Scepter of Light, which, in my opinion, is a pretty cool ancient magical Maruvian artifact. I mean, Mateo thinks so too. So, glow, blaze, envision, reveal, illuminate, farsight, bloom, they all do something different. And most of the spells, it seems, are, in fact, supportive type spells, with only one offensive spell in her repertoire, and that one is Blaze. I'd like to take a moment to address this spell though, because between Discord and Tumblr and Twitter and a host of other platforms, I have seen people debating this spell for years now. It is a common enough opinion that Elena is this wild, ruthless warrior who takes no mercy on anyone, using this horrific, murderous weapon. I would like to correct this misconception, okay? Now seriously guys, repeat after me. Blaze is not a kill spell. It has only been failed to one person, and that was Shuriki. And honestly, I kind of wonder if half the reason for that wasn't because of the whole Scepter of Night, Scepter of Light, only one shall remain thing. And, by the way, Craig Gerber confirmed it himself on Twitter recently. He said Blaze creates a bolt of destructive energy. It is not meant to kill, but at close range could be and was lethal. What is important to consider, however, is that Elena has been growing in her magical abilities since midway through Season 1. With Mateo, Zuzo, and later on the Sunbird's help, she masters the abilities of her entry-level scepter, which actually saves her life in the battle against Shuriki, who was legitimately aiming to kill, by the way, in case there was any doubt. In the course of the main Season 2 story arc, Elena comes to cherish and rely on her magic, to the point it becomes a serious part of her identity and she feels lost without it. When the scepter begins to malfunction after her confrontation with Shuriki, she does learn, the hard way, that she is more than her magic. Thank you, Skylar. She's clever and resourceful and well on her way to becoming a great leader. Early in season 3, she gets her scepter back, yay! And shortly after that gets a super magical girl upgrade when she accidentally yeets herself into a magical crystal well. Her transformation comes complete with new sparkly dress, sparkly shoes, and a sparkly master level scepter. Not only that, but her powers are legit god level powers. The downside of her transformation is it made her already sometimes wild emotions a bit more unstable, because in addition to her usual scepter powers, she now has magic that is set off in sometimes unpredictable ways by her emotions. We have seen her make it rain, throw people around, bring inanimate objects to life, and even enchant food with magic. It's really quite a mess. Thankfully, she seems to be starting to learn to manage her emotions well enough that she can even channel them to use her magic when the need arises. In addition to the magic, there are a few important story-related things to note that I believe are an important part of the context surrounding Princess Elena's motivations and choices throughout the series. For one, her intended purpose in this story, which is to learn to be a great leader with her ultimate goal to become queen. This is the quest she was called to way back in episode 1, aka First Day of Rule. Everything she does is with that end goal in mind. In working towards that goal, we've also seen evidence that Elena feels like she has a lot to live up to in her parents' example. We've seen this both in Masks of Magic and in Jewel of Meru, in addition to other places. She wants to honor their memory and she wants to make them proud. And let's not forget the Prophecy of Darkness. Remember way back in Realm of the Jacquins, and then again later in Not Without My Magic, Kitamaz gives Elena the prophecy about the test she has to pass if she's ever to become queen. This mysterious, ominous threat has hung over her head for over 2 years now, and it's given her no small amount of stress and worry in that time. We've seen it time and time again. Okay. With those points in mind, I would like to take a moment to point out some of Elena's character flaws and weaknesses. Now, stop hissing at me, don't send me any hate mail. I love Elena too, and I think she's a wonderful character. But the fact remains that she has character flaws, as well she should. She would not be an interesting character without them. So, that being said, like any good and interesting character, Elena has plenty of character flaws. And the really cool thing about this is that you can watch her maturity and her growth as she's improved in these areas over the years. Some areas she still has a way to go, but hey, that is awesome. These are what make her so wonderfully human and relatable. For one, she can be hot-headed and quite impulsive. Sometimes it's over small things like trying to fight off magical creatures with a bucket. And sometimes it's a vengeance-fueled rage where the stakes are quite literally her life and the lives of those around her. Her emotions can also be a bit unpredictable. We saw it a little bit early on, but we've seen it big time in season 3. Her emotions cloud her judgment and sometimes make it difficult for her to see things clearly. And Elena is quite confident in her abilities. Some would describe it as hubris or extreme overconfidence. And I would say this is most prominent in late season 1 and early season 2. A really great example that encompasses this mindset of hers is the song I've Got It Down, which really set her up for a reality check in that episode in particular. Thankfully, we've watched her grow in that area and find balance. Another thing, when Elena gets an idea in her head, she can be quite stubborn and to the point of being short-sighted. A really good example of this is in Norbert Peace Prize, when we see her trying to mediate between Queen Abigail and King Hector, and she has it stuck in her head that the only way to solve this problem is to make them become royal friends. And what she fails to see is what Isabel was trying to explain to her, that in her experience, she learned that she doesn't have to get along with everybody. She just has to put getting the job done above her personal feelings. Another excellent example would be in Finding Zuzo, when Elena let her emotional attachment to the lighthouse cloud her judgment, and she wouldn't listen to Naomi's common sense explanation. Another thing that it caused a problem for her, and I imagine she still has room to grow in this area. Another interesting character weakness, I believe, is that Elena sees the good in everyone and will accept anyone and everyone as a friend until proven otherwise. And if I'm being completely honest, I think it's really hard to count that as a flaw because honestly, it's just part of her kind, loving, and trusting nature. But as a ruler whose job it is to protect her kingdom full of people, that attitude, well, it definitely wins her many allies. However, it also makes her quite vulnerable to enemies who may seek to take advantage of her hospitality. Carla, Rita, I'm looking at you. I suppose it's a good thing that she has loyal friends who are more suspicious and street smart than she. So now that we've talked a bit about Elena's weaknesses and character flaws, it's only fair to roll back around to talk about her strengths. And Elena has many strengths, which are super important to note right alongside her weaknesses in order to understand who she is as a character. These strengths and weaknesses working in tandem give her balance and make her well-rounded. So one of my favorite things about Elena is that she strongly believes in the concept of servant leadership. Her main concern has been shown time and time again to be the well-being of her people and her kingdom. And she's the kind of ruler who will jump right into the thick of things and work right alongside her people and do whatever it takes no matter what it looks like. Or whatever. For example, in Prince Too Charming, when she's digging in the dirt and Prince Alonso's giving her a hard time about it, and she tells him that this is exactly how a ruler behaves. Her job is to serve her people. Or in First Day of Rule, when she goes after the Noblins, and she states very strongly that her job is to protect everyone, even if that means swinging at some purple creatures with a bucket. I love this about her. Elena is generally kind to everyone she meets and demonstrates love to those around her, whether friend or stranger, regardless of their social ranking or station. We see her show love and kindness to Christina in Rise of the Sorceress by letting her dance on stage with them and doing everything in her power to make sure Christina was comfortable and was feeling good about herself. We see her support Julio in Incredible Shrinking Royals in spite of the fact that she had a constant stream of negativity coming from Doña Paloma about his humble beginnings and how he didn't have the right background and how he was doomed to fail. Also, we see her immediately accept Rita in Spy in the Palace. Carla, Rita, which again is not necessarily a good thing because, so many bad things came out of that. However, I think it's important to note this because it kind of shows how kind and loving and generous Elena is and how Rita was just someone she barely knew. Like, sure, she was supposedly Armando's 57th cousin or whatever, but she wasn't another royal, she just another girl, and Elena wanted to be friends. Elena is empathetic and compassionate. She's always willing to comfort a friend or help a subject in need. Recently, we saw her immediately go to Mateo's comfort and aid in Spirit of a Wizard when he was mourning the loss of his grandfather. We see her drop everything to help Carmen and Julio in A Day to Remember. We see her offer the hand of friendship to Doña Paloma in Navidad, even though Doña Paloma had schemed over and over again and caused a lot of problems. Elena is brave, sometimes almost insanely so. There are very few things Elena is afraid of, and her bravery often sends her running headfirst into trouble. But it also makes her a warrior and a protector of and for her people. We see Elena with a bucket in First Day of Rule, swinging at these little creatures. We see Elena jumping off Skylar's back to catch the Jewel of Meru back in Jewel of Meru. That was a really cool jump, by the way. Elena facing down Marimonda. Elena facing down Charoka before she had any idea that he really was a good, kind person. Rock monster. So, Elena is fiercely loyal to those she loves. So long as it doesn't conflict with her personal sense of right and wrong, she will nearly always have her friends back. We see Elena and Mateo together often. She's supported him time and time again, starting in Spellbound when she appointed him Royal Wizard in spite of the fact that he was still kind of a young wizard in training. She believed in him when he didn't even believe in herself. In Scepter of Night, she had his back even when their paths were kind of going in opposite directions. She believed in him and believed in his belief of his decision so much that she diverted from her path and helped him find that scepter piece. Again, the fact that it caused trouble later on is not the point here. The point is that she had his back. Then there's Elena and Naomi. From the very beginning, she saw Naomi's potential. In First Day of Rule, she appointed her to her ground council just because she had a good feeling about Naomi's common sense and perseverance. Then later on in Finders Leapers, Elena had Naomi's back when Esteban did not think that Naomi was up to the job, but Elena believed in her, and I think that's really important. Then there's Elena and Skylar. They have a very sweet relationship, and Elena has been there to uplift Skylar's morale, confidence, quite a few times over the course of the years. We see it way back in Flight of the Jacquins when she convinces the other Jacquins in the Guardian clan to let him be their Navigator, saying that she believed in him and the fact that he always showed up and got the job done when it counted. Then later again, we see her having his back in King Skylar when she helps to encourage him to get out there and take charge, even though he doesn't believe in himself, but she strongly believes that he has what it takes to be a king. Elena is committed to doing the right thing no matter what. I think this is great. Sometimes, however, her sense of right and wrong clashes with her advisors and leads her to disobey the vote of her council on occasion, sometimes for better, like we saw in All Heated Up, and sometimes for worse, as we saw in Shapeshifters. And above all else, Elena values her family and would quite literally lay down her life for any one of them. We see this with Elena and Isabel. She was driven to distraction in Tale of Two Scepters and abandoned everything when she thought there was a possibility of Isabel being in even a little bit of danger when she saw where Shuriki was in relationship to the palace. Elena and Luisa, she loves her grandmother and so much, and even when Elena's being run ragged by her job, by her duty to the crown, she rearranged, dropped everything to try her best, the best that she could, to be there for Luisa and to help her with her chocolate shop, because she did not want to make her grandmother sad. Elena and Francisco, we saw Elena literally jump in the face of danger to fight that Makoko back in The Return of El Capitan. Turned out that she needed Francisco to save her, but that is also not the point. The point is she cared and her motivation was to protect. And of course, there's also Esteban. Of course, obviously right at this moment, they are not on the best speaking terms at all. But I have faith that that will change by the end and that we will see one of them lay down their lives for them. But that's another story and that's total speculation. The point is she loves her cousin and would protect him just as much as any of the rest of her family. Finally, Elena is extremely supportive of her friend's dreams and aspirations. She has supported Mateo constantly in his journey from wizard in training to master wizard. We see her offering him the tamburita on more than one occasion. We see her constantly nudging and supporting and pushing him in the right direction when he doesn't think he has what it takes. We see her supporting Gabe's bid to become guard captain way back in Curse of El Guapo. And we see her supporting his decisions mostly since then. For example, in Changing of the Guard, when Gabe just up and announces, hey, I need to hire more guards because we have a pirate problem. And Elena is 100% on board with his request. Or in Finding Zuzo, when he comes to her and says, hey, I think that myself and a small contingent of guards needs to go and find the Delgados. And she agrees and supports him in his request. And when he wants his guards to learn magic, and Mateo is completely against it in Crash Course, she supports his idea and finds a solution that works for both of the guys. Sometimes, though, those dreams and aspirations, supporting those her friends, comes at a personal cost. Like when she had to say goodbye to Naomi in the last laugh. We see that this takes a toll on Elena emotionally. It's clear that saying goodbye to Naomi was very difficult, and I think it's safe to say it broke her heart. However, she loves her friend so much that she was willing to send her on her way, even giving her a ship, and, putting on a brave face as best as she could. I think that's true friendship, and that really shows the depth of Elena's feelings and just her heart for those that she loves, her friends, her family. Now that we've talked a bit about Elena's strengths and weaknesses, let's talk about her successes and some of her mistakes. To start with, as far as successes go, Elena prefers to operate diplomatically. She wants to make friends and allies wherever she can. We've watched her forge alliance after alliance from day one. King Toshi in Model Sister, King Juan Ramon and Prince Alonso and Prince Too Charming, King Joaquin, King Raja, and King Lars in Royal Retreat. We can't count King Hector just yet. But then in Masks of Magic, we see all of the ambassadors, Nathaniel and Shoji again, and then Prince Alonso. She ended quite a long feud with Paraíso by befriending Princess Valentina in Royal Rivalry. Not only that, but she did the impossible in Song of the Sirenas by forging peace between humans and Sirenas. And finally, there was Queen Abigail and King Hector in Nuremberg Peace Prize. She brought them together and helped them come to an agreement, and I think she definitely friends with Queen Abigail, and King Hector is a little less persona non grata after that, I think. Not only that, Elena has worked hard to restore her kingdom's culture that was nearly lost during Shuriki's reign by reviving old traditions and festivals and starting new ones. We see the Peace Festival was an old festival that was brought back in Olabal. We see the Jacquin Festival, a new festival from Spy in the Palace. The Sunflower Festival was another old festival in Rise of the Sorceress. All Kingdoms Fair in the episode with the same title. So we see her bringing a lot of those fun, exciting, and Carnival, let's not forget Carnival. We see that twice now. So, she makes these happen. With the help of others, she has saved the day on multiple occasions by defeating powerful magical creatures. We see her face down Marimonda in Realm of the Jacquins, the Anchimon in Not Without My Magic, the Mococo in El Capitan, Soloso and all of his shape-shifting buddies in Tides of Change. Then in Navidad, we see her unite her entire city to celebrate their Navidad traditions together on Noche Buena. Even when it seemed all was lost, everyone was fighting, all of her ideas had been disasters, but finally she brought them together with the power of song. And in addition to that, she found a way to touch the stone-cold heart of our favorite Magister of Trade, the one who did her best to sabotage the whole thing. That's right, she brought Doña Paloma in and included her in all of the celebrations, and it was actually kind of a sweet moment. And speaking of Navidad, let's not forget how Elena set aside her own personal sadness to try and bring joy and spark holiday cheer with her friends and her cousin in Still Place Like Home. Elena celebrates her friends' culture by helping them honor their important holidays. For example, her brand new friend Rebecca in Festival of Lights. She helped her create a beautiful Hanukkah feast. She saved Family Day in Nuremberg Peace Prize. We also see her take great joy in celebrating her friends' and family's lives. For example, she throws a huge quinceañera for Naomi, even though she's turning 16 in My Fair Naomi. She creates a perfect little, as perfect as possible, small, intimate party for Chloe in the birthday cruise. And let's not forget the surprise party she planned for her cousin Esteban way back in Island of Youth. And finally, Elena even helped settle family disputes and has acted as matchmaker for her friends and subjects. We see her settle a sibling dispute between Carmen and Julio in A Day to Remember. She even helps them save their restaurant. And then in Family Treasure, we see her settle the fight between the brothers Agama. And then as far as matchmaking goes, she helped bring Charoka and Charika together in Law of a Story, and more recently, she helped bring Armando and Marlena together for Sweetheart's Day, which was just so beautiful. So right there alongside those successes have been quite a few mistakes in Elena's reign as Crown Princess. But most of them, I would say, I'm confident in saying that she has learned from them. And this makes her incredibly dynamic and relatable as a character. We've watched her on multiple occasions stretch herself too thin and not quite be able to fulfill all of her promises as she struggles to balance the weight of her crown with her love for her family. For example, in Model Sister, and then again in Sugar Rush. On a more serious note, we've seen Elena decide that she was above the law and disobeyed the Grand Council's decision in the name of doing the right thing. Now, I will say this is a very tricky one because I honestly believe in All Heated Up, Elena was right about Charoka. So what is a princess to do when her gut tells her that the council was just plain wrong? In this case, I think following the rules is important, and Francisco had a point. As Crown Princess, it is her job to uphold the law. However, I also agree with Elena that one should also think with their heart. So all in all, yes, she was wrong to disobey. However, I feel like this is more of an indicator of her maturity level at the time and how much she still had to learn rather than a morally reprehensible act. And in the end, I think Elena and Francisco both learned a thing or two about compromise. Then there's Shapeshifters, where she not only disobeyed the council, she lied about it to Gabe in order to get him to go along with her plan. And this is one where, while I understand her feelings and I find them to be valid, I also think she was 100% wrong from just about any perspective. And really, it blew up in her face. She got herself and her friends put under Jacqueline arrest. Oops. And the big difference here versus All Heated Up is that she acted out of a desire for vengeance, not from a true moral high ground. Plus, lying is just a terrible idea, no matter how you frame it. This incident was the beginning of Elena's vengeance arc, and it came to a head just a few episodes later. This leads to her drive for vengeance and race for the realm, causing their mission to fail. Not only did she and her friends fail to keep a single piece of the Scepter of Night, her short-sightedness led to her enemy acquiring all the pieces of the scepter. Oh, and yeah, let's not forget that her actions almost led to the death of her best friend. This is one area where I really feel Elena did learn her lesson pretty quickly. If not in this episode, then definitely in the next episode. Personally, I find this to be forgivable, particularly when considered alongside the fact that we are watching the girl suffer legitimate post-traumatic stress disorder flashbacks throughout the episode. She is suffering. Was this an issue that she needed to find a way to move past? Absolutely. Did she? I do think she grew from this experience and was able to take the first steps towards keep on moving on. Thank you for that wonderful advice, Floringos. Clearly, we see later on in Season 3 that she still has a bit of growing to do in that area. Finally, in Tale of Two Scepters, Elena did not listen to her mentors and abandoned her scepter training in order to chase after Shuriki, which resulted in leading the witch straight to the palace and straight to Isabel, the one person she was most desperate to protect. Her obsession with Shuriki put a target on her beloved little sister's back. And again, I think Elena learned her lesson in this episode and was able to start mentally moving past her obsession with capturing Shuriki. And we actually see evidence of this growth in Song of the Sirenas. When Elena discovers that Shuriki is most likely coming for her, she doesn't immediately go on the hunt. She maintains a defensive position and patrols the city with her friends, which, compared to how she had reacted the last few episodes when Shuriki was near, I find that showed incredible growth. So in addition to her mistakes, there are a few controversial choices that Elena has made more recently that have caused more than one person to scratch their head and wonder, what is her angle? Now, before I jump into the major issues, let's take a small moment to talk about the statues of her enemies in her garden, okay? It's a joke, people, all right? Let's not overthink this one. It's supposed to be funny. Like, I get it, the idea of keeping your enemy as an oversized garden gnome seems a bit creepy, but let's remember that Elena is not the one who turned either of those Malvagos into stone. Matteo stoned Fiyero not once, but twice, the second time on purpose. And it was as she turned Victor Delgado in a fit of what? Annoyance? Rage? And let's remember that Matteo said in Science Unfair that it was better for everyone that Fiyero remain encased in stone. So really, it may not have even been Elena's choice to do such. I imagine that the decision on what to do with criminals lies with the Grand Council. And yeah, that's for other people. So this brings me to the whole deal with Victor and Carla Delgado. I have seen so many people getting up in arms over the fate of the Delgados and the fact that we have this huge emotional scene at the end of Magic Within and then nothing for 17 episodes. So let me just say that we should all calm down and think about this rationally. Of course, at this time, it's all speculation. But seriously, we have legitimately zero clue as to what is going on behind the scenes. Has Carla been in prison all this time? Maybe, maybe not. So either way, here's a semi-unpopular opinion. While I love Carla and have high hopes for #Sunset Carla, she is a criminal. She has committed crimes against the crown and lots of them. If this is real life and not a fantasy story for children, that would be grounds for execution. Thankfully, this is a fantasy, so there is still hope for Victor and Carla redemption, and I fully support it. But all of that to say, even if Carla had been in prison this whole time, Elena and her council, who approve such sentences, are perfectly within their rights to issue such punishments to criminals. I don't find it cruel in the slightest. Honestly, I kind of think that the silence on the topic of the Delgados has been so huge that it feels significant to me, almost as if there was a purpose for keeping the audience in the dark as to what their fate post-Captain Matteo, which I think honestly took place within a few days at the longest, maybe a few weeks after Carnival. I could be wearing a clown wig when this is all over, but I predict one of two things. One, either there have been dealings behind the scenes that we do not know about for storytelling reasons, or two, Matteo's Cursebreaker potion is high level and complex and required all of this time to either collect rare or unique reagents, or the potion needed time to mature. Of course, there could also be something important that we haven't considered yet, but I am fairly confident that it's for a reason and has absolutely nothing to do with Elena being a ruthless, heartless monster. Finally, there's her dealing with Esteban and his betrayal. Honestly, we all knew it was not going to go well when it was finally revealed. How could it? They spent well over 2 seasons showing us how the coup and her parents' murder affected Elena. It quite literally haunted her for 4+ decades later. It was traumatizing and the kind of thing that would break a lesser person. So for her to find out that the person she loved like a brother and trusted not only her life, but her family and the welfare of her kingdom had betrayed them all, to say she's hurt and angry is an understatement. She's furious in the moment and utterly brokenhearted when it's all said and done. When the trial comes around and she chooses exile as a suitable punishment, well, once again, he committed a crime, even if it was a long time in the past. In legal terms, his involvement with Shuriki could be considered accessory before the fact, which in an American court of law is punishable to the equal extent as the actual perpetrator. And this is from the Cambridge Law Dictionary. I am not a lawyer. Anyway, Avalor is obviously not an American court of law, and they probably aren't going to go through all the legalese in a kids show because, well, it's boring and not important to the overall kids story. However, as a more mature audience, it's well within our capabilities to use our powers of critical thinking to consider these kinds of background details and help us really judge the decision-making process. Did she make a right choice? I don't know, honestly. At the very least, her decision certainly had its share of consequences. What I can say is that it probably would have been wiser to let him stay in the dungeon for a few days while all of them processed their emotions and cleared their heads. And really, the fact that the council the council that sentenced him was completely made up of family and Naomi, who was pretty much like family, honestly. Yeah, that makes it kind of difficult. Also, I think it's important to note that Elena was not alone in her choice. A majority in the Grand Council voted against Esteban to include Naomi. But what's done is done, and the after effects of the sentence have been wild, to say the least. The point is that Elena made a choice out of emotion that might have faded a bit given some time, and now there are consequences she has to deal with, which is really what this whole story is about at this point. Esteban became so desperate for his freedom, he let the Delgados free, joined forces with Ash, became magical, and is now implicit in a plot to take over Avalor. Though, is it foolish to hold out hope that he won't go through with it? Or that he still loves his family so much he's doubting his choices, or possibly acting as a double agent? We'll see. However, I would submit to you that Esteban also made his share of choices before and after the sentence. That did not help his case one bit. In short, he behaved like a villain. He was not willing to accept consequences for his actions and betrayed his family a second time to join forces with yet another evil magical lady who was hell-bent on destroying everything Elena loves. I'm sorry, y'all, but saying I'm sorry does not erase the past. When the offense perpetrated is so great it caused Elena 4 decades of emotional pain and suffering, her reaction is 100% valid. I'd even say 110%. Do I think she's heartless? Nope. Do I think she's evil because of it? Nope. In Dreamcatchers, we see Elena's new magic completely Hulk out, and she is legitimately scary for a few minutes. Seriously, her powers seem almost godlike in that state. It's clear in this moment that if she doesn't learn to control her emotions, she could literally shake the fabric of time and reality with the magic inside her. I don't think that's going to happen. In her song, she tells Issa that she is terrified of hurting people with her magic, and that's why she's refusing to talk about her feelings. Because at that point, she didn't know how to deal. Is that not relatable? Not only that, but I think it demonstrates her heart motivation to be ultimately selfless in spite of this one dark root of emotion named Esteban that seems to be gnawing at her very soul. Thankfully, by the end of the episode, she learned that conceal, don't feel is a terrible strategy, and that learning her feelings along with the occasional reminder of the baby Jacqueline's mantra is much healthier for everyone involved, especially herself. I honestly think it was healthy for Elena to share her feelings with Esteban in Dreamcatcher. It gave her the peace she needed to manage her mental and emotional health. And I've said it before on my blog, and I'll say it again. Regardless of her choices, Elena's feelings are all valid. She is allowed to be sad and angry and feel all those things about the deaths of her parents and the trauma she experienced. She is allowed to be upset with her cousin and to not want him in her life because of the pain he caused her entire family and kingdom, not to mention the pain he caused her personally. But again, I won't lie, that choice, regardless of how much she needed it for her mental health, nudged Esteban farther down his path of darkness. It's kind of a natural consequence, and I'm not blaming either one for it. It happened. Time to just roll with it. Elena does not owe Esteban forgiveness, and saying otherwise is honestly kind of a victim-blaming narrative, which is wrong on so many levels. But the truth is that it would be healthier for Elena's sake to forgive Esteban, which is not the same as restoration, by the way. That, however, is a whole other discussion. Her major hang-up, however, the one that I think is going to lead to her ultimate downfall, not permanent, mind you, think more like Luke Skywalker losing that duel to Darth Vader and being at his lowest point. I mean, come on, dude just lost his hand and found out the big bad of the galaxy was his father, okay? We can give him a little bit of slack. But before bouncing back and saving the galaxy, which he brought his Sith Lord father back over to the light side in the process. Anyway, but I think Elena's biggest problem, the problem that is going to cause her to fall to her lowest point yet, is twofold. Her ability to let go of the past combined with a deep-seated fear of the unknown. Now hold up right there. I can already hear the hissing and the fist shaking in anger on the other side of the screen. Now hear me out, okay? As mentioned before, Elena experienced something incredibly traumatic. She witnessed her parents' murder and had the murder weapon turned on her, causing her to be trapped in that amulet alone with those painfully fresh, dark memories for 41 years. Elena has been betrayed by not one, but two trusted family members. I know we don't like to talk about the dirtbag Duke of Nueva Vista, but still, he was familia and he chose Shuriki over Elena, so he counts. One family betrayal is awful and heartbreaking, but two, that's a lot for anyone to deal with, especially someone with emotional scars that run as deep as Elena's. We've seen Elena grow in this area over the course of the series, and really, she has. We see her start to come to terms with her parents' death every Dia de los Muertos. She's learned about not letting the darkness of the past cloud her future in Race for the Realm. And really, I feel like getting to hug her parents and chat with them in the spirit world was a balm for her soul in Flower of Light. The trouble is that she thought she made her final peace with the whole thing, first with the defeat of Shuriki, and then with the capture of the Delgados to include Ash. And suddenly, it all just came crashing back with the shocking reveal of Esteban's betrayal. And now, her inability to forgive Esteban has set him on his own path that is almost certainly to be the source of this mysterious darkness that is the test she has to pass in order to become queen. Add that to her fear of failing her family and her parents' memory, and it really makes Elena's obsession with personally capturing the bad guys seem quite reasonable. The scars from her past trauma run deep, and that darkness haunts her. Not only that, but there's an actual prophecy of darkness hanging over her head that states she won't become queen if she can't overcome whatever this is that's coming for her. Personally, I predict that her personal darkness and the corporeal darkness that is coming are connected somehow. It'll be twofold, but we shall see. It's just a prediction. She thought she brought the one responsible for her parents' death to justice, only to find out that nope, there's still one more out there, the worst one yet in her opinion, because he was someone she loved and trusted like a brother. That is a lot for one young woman to handle. How she overcomes these things remains to be seen. I have no doubt that she will overcome the darkness on all sides. This is a Disney show after all, right? Honestly, I kind of think the key to Elena's success over the darkness is going to be love. Everything in Elena's life is fueled by her ability to love. Even most of her faults and mistakes are fueled by her love in some way. Just a few more weeks to find out for sure. Yay! But the important thing here is that we have to consider all of the angles in order to accurately understand Elena's character. As you can see from my blabbering, she has a lot of those angles, so doing that is a much more difficult job than it may sound. We've talked about Elena's strengths and weaknesses, in addition to some of the difficult choices she's had to make, all while examining the context surrounding them. Through the whole series, we have seen Elena make mistakes and learn from them. We've cheered for her successes and cried when she's been hurt or sad. Really, she's a truly dynamic character with a good heart and a desire to do what's best for her kingdom. All in all, Elena is a richly complex character with a beautiful heart and a deep capacity for love. She is flawed, sure, but those flaws are what make her human and so wonderfully relatable. The fact that she not only desires to do what's right, she also learns from her mistakes, are what make her an incredible role model for children and adults alike. Elena Castillo Flores is absolutely without a doubt the hero of her story. And I believe she is going to come out of the darkness stronger and with more resolve than ever. Elena will finally be ready to rule.